where truth and fiction collide. You're listening to John Christie. This is the intersection of Christianity and culture.
Have you heard about the nuns? Not those ladies in black who used to slap your hands with a ruler when you were in elementary school, but the N-O-N-E nuns, those who are no longer religiously affiliated. They've left the church and they no longer identify with mainstream religion. Well, today my guest directed a documentary film called Leaving God, and we will talk about the nuns, and we'll talk about why he left religion. This is the John Christie podcast, and I am your host, John Christie. So my guest's name is John Follis, and he's an ex-advertising executive turned into a filmmaker, and he's also an ex-Christian turned into an atheist, or at least a nun, non-religious. John details his journey away from faith and to the nuns in his documentary film, Leaving God, and he's here with me today to talk about it. So, John, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So let's start with a little bit about you. I kind of gave a teaser about your movie and the nuns, and we'll get into all that in your advertising. But tell me a little bit about yourself. Let the audience get to know you.
Yeah, well, as you said, I spent my career in advertising, mostly in New York City. Worked literally on Madison Avenue. Started working with some of the top agencies in New York on accounts like Pizza Hut and Volkswagen. And eventually found a business partner, started my own ad agency, and ended up becoming one of the most award-winning creative shops in the country, even though there was like 10 of us. So that was in the 90s. And then toward the end of the 90s, when I could see the media landscape changing, I kind of shifted my business model and did more. Everyone was asking me, how do you make a website? Do I need a website? And what's a blog? And things like that. So had a lot less to do with traditional advertising. So this was at the dawn of Skype in 2004. And that's when I thought it would really be cool to brand myself as a marketing therapist, because I would talk to these people about their business, and it was like therapy talking to some of these people. They were so emotionally involved with their business. So I ended up consulting for about 15 years online, like you and I are doing, back when Skype started in 2004. And I wouldn't call myself a filmmaker, but I've always dabbled in digital video since iMovie started in the late 90s. Some family stuff, and then started making more involved videos. And in 2017, when I started doing research about what you just said, the nuns, and in particular, a lot of these clergy people, not just people like me, but because, listen, it took me 40 years to kind of come to the point that I came to deciding that I no longer felt like I wanted to follow the Christian beliefs that I was raised in, and how difficult that was for me. It took 40 years. So what I started doing or hearing about a lot of clergy members who were experiencing the same change of heart that I had gone through regarding belief in religion and God, and knowing how challenging it was for me to go through that process. I tried to imagine what it would be like for someone who was in the clergy and spent their life preaching the gospel, to go through this process. So I was intrigued with some of the research I discovered around that. And as I was getting more involved in video creation, I thought it might be interesting to attempt a documentary film that addressed that issue of clergy members leaving the clergy and coming out as non-believers. And then maybe, I wasn't really sure where to go with this. I was just essentially challenging myself to make something that I thought could be watchable on a topic that I thought was in the public discourse, the idea of these nuns, because that more and more of that idea was being written about in the press. So I decided to start a documentary, not knowing where it would go. And eventually I made a 47-minute documentary that won a first-time filmmaker award from the Hollywood Independent International Documentary Film Festival, which was a surprise to me, since I basically made it from my desktop here. If you see it, you know it doesn't involve a lot of lights, camera, and action. I basically used a lot of still images and pulled things off of the internet, off of YouTube and things like that, kind of patched it together. But I think the story holds up well enough, apparently well enough, to win this Hollywood Documentary Film Award. And then it somehow ended up on a website that I had not even heard of called Top Documentary Films. All I knew is that over a weekend, my views doubled from about 5,000 to 11,000. And I thought it was a mistake, because it took like 6 months to come to 5,000, and then over a 48-hour period, it was at 11,000. And found out that all the views were coming from this website, Top Documentary Films, that I hadn't even heard of. And when I went to the site, realized that this was a platform that was featuring the best documentaries from around the world. And there on their main page was a really nice review of my film with a link to watch it. So as a result of that, it's now been seen by 40,000 people from 98 countries around the world.
That's
and my
great.
out-of-pocket expense to make this was $57.
One thing I wanted to jump back to before we get into the movie itself and your departure from the faith, I'm struck with how we have very similar backgrounds, because I started as a graphic artist in my career outside of my religious studies. I started as a graphic artist and started, with the print materials, advertising, worked on a magazine, a bi-weekly magazine, bi-monthly, I guess, came out every other week. Did brochures. I worked in marketing departments for a couple corporations, and that kind of was transitioning into digital media in the 90s for me. And so I was just kind of grabbing toward anything I could, any work that came that was challenging, that was exciting, everything from doing, real high-end digital imaging, like Photoshop type work and scanning and manipulating images, to interactive CD-ROMs, went into video, again, marketing, also levels of digital media. And as websites were becoming a thing around the mid to late 90s, I basically learned how to, taught myself, or through the internet, taught myself how to write HTML code and CSS and JavaScript, and started building web pages, and kept doing that to the point where the early 2000s, I was out in Silicon Valley. I moved out to California. My wife's from California, and got a job as a creative director for a .com called autoweb.com. And again, the push of everything that I was doing was not just the print, but the digital media and marketing. And so that was all our creative work, but I was also overseeing a lot of the all the creative side of our website and our partner websites. And so in doing that, I had to get into more detailed coding, where I learned what was called ASP.NET Microsoft product, and database administration and SQL and all that. And I kind of started transitioning at that point away from the creative side and more toward the technical side. But, I've spent the better part of the last 20 years of my career really in the technical end, doing software architecture and things like that. But that was where I kind of cut my teeth and was able to really do my week in atheism, was because of that creative background and that digital media background. It was a logical progression. I had been doing these things for clients. I could do it for myself. Never did, quite hour and a half, 2 hour feature film or documentary, but still, I've always been one to kind of take the chance and jump at things. So it's pretty neat because, yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking, wow, we're kind of cut from the same cloth on that side. We kind of came up through the same ways. So that struck me as pretty interesting.
Yeah, difference is you got your film on a major media platform, and I'm on Top Documentary Films. Most people don't know about it. So kudos to you for getting it on Amazon. That's quite a feat.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's been good. I can't believe now it's this February it'll be 10 years since it was released, which is amazing. But it still has a steady stream of viewers. It's been free on Amazon for, I don't know, at least 7-8 years, something like that. In the beginning, we were selling it, trying to basically recover some of the money that we put into camera and equipment and things like that, and traveling. But once we kind of got at least to that point where we recovered some of our money, or most of our money, decided, let's just get this out there for free. Both David and I were more interested in people being able to watch it than anything else. So yeah, if you're Amazon Prime, it's free. I think if not, it's like a 99-cent rental or something, but anyone with Prime. But yeah, it's nice to have your work out there, something that, not only codifies your thoughts and your mindset, your passions, but your work, what you actually do, what you take pride in, your presentation. So again, not to make this a congratulatory back and forth, but congratulations to you, because I know what it takes to get one of those done. That's why I haven't done another yet. Yeah,
and same here. I don't have any aspirations to be a filmmaker. I just for some reason I just felt this was something that I thought I might be able to do. I wanted to see. I was kind of passionate about the subject. I thought it was a very intriguing subject, and I wasn't even sure I could do it. But I've been asked by people, okay, so what's the next one you're going to do? And I have no interest or motivation to do anything else right now. I've got other interests, but I've won many advertising awards, but from my point of view, I'm not nearly as proud of the awards that I won than the fact that I've gotten 40,000 people to view this film, and most of them seem to like it.
Yeah,
which is nice.
Yeah, you're right. So let's talk about the movie some, and you started getting into it a little bit there. Tell me about your religious background and where you were at, what involvement you had before you came. I know it was a slow journey to the realization, but tell me a little bit about that, and then we'll get into what it was that actually started triggering you to to question, at least I'll say it
Well,
that way.
I assume you know the answer to the question because you watched the film, right?
I do, but I'm
Okay,
people listening don't.
okay.
But we don't have to tell them everything. We want them to see the film.
Yeah. So I was raised Catholic and went to parochial catechism, I guess, was the first thing I experienced. You were raised Catholic as well, right, John?
I was part Roman Catholic and part Greek Orthodox, but
Okay.
those were kind of our claims.
Yeah. So, you know what I'm talking about, I assume, with catechism and stuff like that. And
Yes.
got my first communion, and then that was followed by more teaching, instruction, memorization of stuff in order to pass the test to be confirmed. I guess I was about 11 at that time. And then when I was 13, I went to a parochial junior high school for 3 years. So that was my upbringing, both from a family perspective and an academic perspective. And then when I went away to college, once I started hitting high school years, I really was not enthusiastic about going to church with my parents on Sunday. You know, they would make me get dressed up and put on the jacket and tie. I was very formal back then. And that was the last thing I wanted to do on a Sunday. So once I was on my own at college, I just kind of forgot about church and religion for the most part. But I still believed in God. I still believed in a lot of the things I was brought up to believe. I just didn't really like the idea of going to Catholic church on Sunday. So I ended up getting very attracted to the Sunday morning preachers that I stumbled on when I was flipping channels on a Sunday morning that I really liked. One of them was Robert Schuller, who was broadcasting out of Southern California. I guess he was the main one. And again, we're talking the 80s at this point, I think. And I really liked his energy. He was very positive. He was a great speaker. It wasn't depressing like my Catholic church experience growing up. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that half the Mass was in Latin, so I didn't even understand it, you know, if you can believe that, what that's like for a kid to have to, you know, sit through that. So this was really the first time any minister-like person had presented a spiritual message in a way that I actually enjoyed listening to. So I continued kind of exploring and trying to understand. I would buy books, spiritual themed books, and I would keep reading about it and stuff like that. And then when I eventually moved to New York City when I was in my mid-20s, I joined the Marble Collegiate Church, which is a huge church in New York that's been around for about 150 years. It's one of the first churches built in New York City. And I learned about it because the minister at the time was a guy named Norman Vincent Peale, who was one of those Sunday morning ministers that I got to see on TV. And like Robert Schuller, I really liked his messages. He was self-deprecating. He used a lot of humor. The message was very, very positive and uplifting, and I always felt better after listening to his sermon. So when I moved to New York, I made it a mission to find out about this church that he was the minister at, and ended up getting involved with that church for 25 years. Should I keep going?
So, no, that's actually a good spot because in the movie,
I don't want to give away I don't want to say too much because then
right.
I'm going to watch the film.
Going to watch it, right? But yeah, you talk about your how your career in your religion, your faith, kind of intersected at one point with doing marketing for the church. But then you get to a point where what struck me was the comment you made where I think was when it started to unravel for you, or the first cord was pulled, the first string on the sweater was pulled for you, was 9/11. And you said, how could a loving God make or allow this to happen? And that was kind of, at least in the film, that was kind of the statement you made as to, like, that was your first, I don't know, is it fair to say that was your first doubt?
That was certainly a major one, but I had some experiences prior to that. I think you may recall in the film, I married a woman that I met in the church, in large part because I felt that we had met in church. I had doubts about whether or not this was a good decision to make. My gut was telling me maybe it's not. But because we had met in church, I rationalized that it was ordained by God, and ended up getting married.
Did you feel pressure from anyone, from the church itself? Was it just more of an internal?
I felt pressure from her. She gave me she gave me an ultimatum. We had been dating a year.
Well, and the reason I ask is because, it's a common thing amongst Christian youth to in a sense, rush to the altar, because, to be honest, I think most of the time it has to do with, Christianity is about abstinence or saving yourself till marriage. That's not what Christianity is about, but that's a part of it. And as such, kids are very quick to want to get married so that they can have sex. And that pressure tends to come in. And sometimes, I've seen it amongst friends and people that I've grown up with. I felt that pressure myself as a Christian youth to, you're at that age and that's the direction you really want to go. You want to explore your sexuality because you have those raging hormones, but yet it's suppressing in the religion. And so we make decisions out of that. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong in either way. It's just something that I've noticed a lot, tends to be a lot of Christian, young Christian marriages tend to have that part to their story.
Yeah, that was not my case at all.
Okay. All right.
As I said,
but you did feel it was from God.
My rationalization was because we had met in church, that was a very heavy thumb on the scale of whether to get married or not to get married. Even though I had some serious doubts about whether this was a good idea, that rationalization, which is exactly what it was a big factor in me getting married. And to answer your question about what started making me skeptical about religion and God and start to ask some serious questions and examine things, was the fact that the marriage crashed and burned almost immediately. And we were separated. We were legally married for three years, but separated most of that time. And in marriage counseling, and nothing seemed to be making the relationship any better. And so, as kind of a desperate attempt to get some perspective on it, I requested a meeting with the head minister of our church. I thought, maybe this guy had a better relationship to God than I did, and maybe some of his hopefully godly words of wisdom could help me figure things out or deal with the pain that I was going through, because it was very painful. Again, I was really confused. That nothing seemed to be working as far as keeping the marriage going with the therapy that we were doing. She was involved with another guy, I should add, that was kind of a factor as well. And
wow.
And didn't seem to be that enthusiastic about changing that situation. So, again, I was at my wit's end and had this meeting with this minister who listened to me talk about it about as long as I've just shared it with you, John. And at the end of it, he said, well, John, marriage is never going to be easy. There's always going to be very difficult times in any marriage, even the good ones, but divorce is not the answer. And I explained to him that we had been separated for 2 years. My wife had been involved with another guy. We'd been in marriage counseling for about a year, and nothing seemed to be working as far as the marriage continuing. And he told me divorce should not be an option. And this was a guy who was a Protestant minister who had a wife at the time. And 8 months after he gave me this advice not to get divorced, he got divorced.
Wow.
So hard not to get a little cynical.
Yeah.
About when something like that happens. So that was the first time. I don't know if it's the first time, but it was certainly a memorable experience that I had when I started thinking that there's some hypocrisy going on here.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's the head minister of this very, very prominent church that I'd been part of for about 20 years. And he couldn't even follow his own advice.
Mm.
So I started having questions as a result of that experience. And then it was a few years later that I woke up to 9/11. And I was living in Manhattan at the time. So I went up to the roof of my building. I could actually see the towers burning from my building. I was maybe 2 miles away or something. And I know that affected everyone, but I don't think it had any greater effect than people who were living in Manhattan at the time.
Yeah, really.
And it had a profound effect on me, because shortly after it was reported that the planes hit the towers, it was reported that they were radical Islamics who were doing it in the name of God. That was their motivation. And their last words were probably Allah Akbar, praise to God,
right,
in Arabic. So they thought they were going to be meeting their maker with a bunch of virgins and, live a very wonderful life after their plane crashed. So once again, I thought, gee, if they're doing it in the name of religion, how many times have heinous acts been done in the name of any number of religions? And started doing some research and found out that, lo and behold, Christians did some pretty bad things in the name of religion. If you look at the Crusades and what happened then. So
Spanish Inquisition. Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. I mean, religion is always.
So, this is not supposed to be a history lesson, but if anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, they just need to research the things that we just mentioned to see that Christians had done many heinous acts in the name of religion. And you look at the Ku Klux Klan, right, that would, lynch black people and think that they were, that was a Christian organization, the Ku Klux Klan, hence the big cross. So, those are just some examples. And you could talk about the witch hunts in Salem, that the church burned women at the stake.
Let's not go too far ahead just yet.
I mean, because the point is, this is significant stuff.
Yep.
And the problem is that I think a lot of people don't think about this stuff. So if all this stuff is done in the name of religion, then maybe there's a problem with religion. That's the
See,
conclusion. That's the
yeah,
conclusion I came to.
and I get that. I understand why you would see that and why you would feel that way. However, I've never gone that direction. It's not because I don't think about it, because I think about it a lot, and I've thought about all of those many things, everything from failed marriages to, or I should say, I've been married to the same person for over 30 years now, but we had a separation time, but I never blame God about that. I've always seen these things as man's responsibility. 9/11, while they were, you can call them religious zealots, that's men. The Ku Klux Klan, racism, slavery, that's man. It's not religion. It's not, and I won't say, I can't necessarily defend all religions in one fell swoop. I'm really more, I guess, willing to talk and defend toward Christianity. So I would say that's not the the foundation of Christian beliefs. Christianity does not teach us uh, to kill the infidels, to wipe out others. Islam has some explaining to do for their scriptures giving specific instructions to do these things, where you don't have that in Christianity. We could get into separation of Old Testament, New Testament, and God commanding things, which I just talked about last week on another podcast. But at the end of the day, that's not what the teachings of Christianity teach us to do. And so in any of these things, Christianity is not teaching us to be racist, to bomb buildings, to do anything destructive like that. It teaches us the opposite of that, actually. And so when people step out and they do these things and they fail, I see it as it's their failure, not the religion's failure. The Spanish Inquisition we mentioned, the witch hunts, the many things. We can point to a lot of these things and say, well, they held up a Bible and they justified it. They held up a Bible and they said, I'm justified to own slaves. But there was also, in all of these situations, people on the other side that held up a Bible and said, no, you're not. You're wrong. You're interpreting it wrong. And that's where we had the abolitionist movement, the people who ended slavery. That's where we had the people in the churches that ended the Spanish Inquisition, or that ended the Crusades and these different things. There were men with their power grabs, their money grabs, their perverted lusts for power, for control, for dominance in all of these situations. It wasn't the ethics of Christianity or God teaching them that. It was men. It was, Cain and Abel. It was Cain killing his brother. And it wasn't God's fault in a sense. It was man's fault. So I'll stop there and let you respond to that.
John, I'm not here to try to change your mind or change anyone's mind. I don't really care what you think.
Oh, but you're on the show to have a discussion about it, right?
I'm interested in it, but what you believe, whatever you believe, good for you. That's fine.
Okay.
Doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. Yeah.
I'm not trying to bother you. I'm trying to have the discussion with you. And
yeah, but I'm not here to try to, this. One of the things I was really, really careful of when I made this film, John, and I hope you noticed it when I made it, is that I didn't want it to come off as trying to convince someone that the way I'm thinking is the right way to think, and this is what you, the viewer, should think. What it was kind of a what I intended to do was make it a journal, an exercise in research and journalism. That everything I reported on or shared was either my own personal experience or something that was very well documented. Like these ministers and clergy people who were coming out. In fact, I actually had a clip of one who was coming out on MSNBC, and I was just creating this documentary like I was a journalist or like a good documentary filmmaker would do. it wasn't an opinion piece or a perspective or trying to convince anyone. It was just saying, this is what's going on, folks. It's not just people like me who are changing their attitude, but even priests and ministers right now are freaking out because they've been doing this thing for their entire career, and now suddenly they've come to a different place where they no longer believe. And this is an interesting thing. I mean, imagine how hard it is to come out as transgender or gay, and I don't think that's even as hard as coming out as a someone who used to be a minister and standing up in front of a congregation every week for years in many cases, and suddenly realizing that they don't believe anymore what they had been preaching, literally preaching for years. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to kind of document and report on, and that's how it started, this film. And then as you referenced earlier, it talked about the broader trend in America, this trend of nuns, non-believers, which is what I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I would call myself a non-believer or something. You know, I like to be positive. A wisdom seeker would be a good, if you want to label me a wisdom seeker. That's the label that I would feel happy about. So I reported on, this broader trend in America away from traditional religion, which has been widely reported on. And again, I referenced a lot of sources about that. And then I got into my personal story. I thought this would be a pretty boring film if all I did was talk about statistics and stuff like that and didn't talk about my own personal experience, which is pretty wild. When you, if you watch the film, again, I don't want to reveal too much of it, but you referenced it earlier. I was actually hired by the church to do an ad campaign, and I was really, really high on the church. I was very passionate about this church, and was happy to respond to their request to try to come up with an advertising campaign that would be running in New York City to attract younger people to the church. And ended up doing that for 16 years. But as you also pointed out, they were a series of events that started out with what I went through with my marriage and divorce and the advice that I had gotten, the hypocritical advice, I should say, that I got from the head minister, who actually got divorced a second time about 2 years after that. So he didn't just get divorced once. The guy who told me not to get divorced didn't just get divorced one time, he got divorced twice. So these things began to create some skepticism in my mind, along with, 9/11 and the research I started doing about how many religions, including the Christian religion, have done bad things in the name of God. And, eventually, I think the nail in the coffin was kind of the experience I referenced, where I asked a 3-word question in a Bible study group that actually got me banned from that group. And the question I simply asked was, is it true? And 2 months later, I got a letter from the church saying, please do not come to this Bible group anymore. They didn't cite that as the reason. Of course, they wouldn't do that, but they came up with a reason why they didn't think I should go to that Bible group anymore. They said I was the real reason was they said I was too old. I was 47 at the time. And they said, this Bible group is for people under 40, so you don't qualify. So
what were you asking is what true? What specifically? Was it just the whole thing?
Oh, so again, I'm giving away the entire film, but that's okay, because I don't know how many people are actually going to be listening to this podcast anyway. Hopefully a lot, but this was something called the Bagels and Bibles that was promoted as a way to this group happened after the Sunday service, and it was a way promoted as a way for any of the church members who had any questions about the sermon or faith or God in general, and just wanted to come in a very chill environment, have a cup of coffee, have a nice bagel, sit around, loosen your tie, and just, go mano a mano with the minister, and don't worry about nothing like a inappropriate question. That's the way it was promoted. So I didn't want to go to this group. I really, at that point, John, I had no interest in going to a Bible group. I had been to many of them over the 20 years that I was involved with the church. And at this point, I was not into going to another. But on the way out, I was, I think, literally grabbed by someone who knew me, because I was the guy who had done this great church advertising campaign. So I had a very positive reputation at the church, and he was headed to this group called the Bagels and Bibles, and wanted to know if I wanted to join him. And I told him I didn't. And he just basically just said, "Oh, you got to come. It's great. Come on, we're going to go and you'll love it." And he just basically coerced me into joining him. So very reluctantly, I go to this group. I figure if nothing else, I'll get a Bible, a bagel, and a cup of coffee. And I sit down, and the minister was headed up by a minister, and he started off the group before he opened it up to the questions with a quote from Scripture. And because it was around Christmas time, it was a seasonal quote, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something to do with when the shepherd in Bethlehem was tending his sheep at night, and from the skies of heaven came a glowing light, and it turned to be an angel of the Lord who came down from heaven and announced that in the town of Bethlehem, a child has been born, and he is the savior of all mankind. And so that was, that's probably a poor attempt at trying to quote Scripture, but I think you know what I'm referencing, right?
Yeah, the birth of Jesus. Yes.
Right. So he starts out the meeting with this, and just about a week before, I watched a program on the History Channel that took a deep dive into the Scriptures and how they relate to the birth of Christ. And on the History Channel program involved having not just scientists and anthropologists, but they had a rabbi on there. They had a priest, a minister, a Bible scholar. I mean, all flavors of experts, right? Running the gamut from the scientific to the Christian minister. And I was actually surprised that they all agreed on one thing. They said, you can't take this literally. They said, a lot of the stuff in the Bible has really good messages, but there are really not many of them, not all of them, but many of them, including this particular one where the angel of the Lord came down and talked to the shepherd and all that stuff, that's really a mythological story to try to, to get a message across about the birth of Christ, and that did it really probably happen? They all agreed that probably didn't happen literally. So here I am in this Bible group, and that's the Scripture that he chooses to start meeting off with and introduce. He said, let's just pray. And, he bow our heads, and he read the Scripture. And then he says, any questions? And I look around, because I'm the new kid in this group, right? I didn't even want to be here. So I look around. 5 seconds pass, 10 seconds pass, 15 seconds. No one is raising their hands. The minister says, come on, people. This is the whole idea. You're supposed to be here to ask questions. No one has a question? Someone must have a question. Look around. Still no hands go up. So finally, I raised my hand. And he says, yes, finally. Okay, great. I said, yeah, I said about that Scripture verse you just read. Is it true? And you could have heard a pin drop for the next 20 seconds. It was as if I gave this guy a gut punch. Now, here's a minister who is heading up this group where it's promoted as a way to ask whatever questions you want. and he couldn't respond to this question.
Yeah.
To the point where I felt like I needed to save the guy, because I was looking around and people in the audience were getting uncomfortable, because it was the stereotypical deer in the headlights look.
Yeah.
And it lasted about a good 10 seconds. And I finally said, well, I kind of tried to help the guy out by explaining my question, because clearly he wasn't prepared for that question. And I said, well, I'm only asking because I just watched this documentary, and I went into the whole story about this documentary, this program I just watched on the History Channel that I just shared a few minutes ago. And I said, well, that's why I'm asking the question. And I couldn't believe his response. He said, well, this was his response. He said, well, I guess you just have to ask yourself, what is truth? To which I felt like responding, and what the fuck does that mean? Can I say that?
You did.
That's what I wanted to say. What I should have said was, because I really didn't know what that meant. Ask yourself what is true. I had been asking that's why I was there, to find out some truthful answers. That's why I was attended this Bagels and Bibles, and I had been asking myself the truth for years. What I needed was answers. I didn't need to ask what the truth. I needed answers. That's why I was there. And here's the guy that's supposed to provide me with answers, and his response is it true? Well, I guess you just have to ask yourself, what is truth? And I had no idea what that meant. And I should have said, I really don't think I understand what that means. Maybe you can explain that to me. What is truth? That's what I should have said. But it was pretty clear that this guy did not want to discuss this issue. To me, that was just a way to deflect it. And I thought it was a pretty lame attempt. And I figured at that point, I would probably, what's the expression? Discretion is a better part of valor. I just sat my ass back down and noticed that the people who were so friendly to me when I walked into the meeting, and they didn't know who I was, were now not so friendly to me as we were walking out at the end of this thing. And that was the last time I stepped foot in that church. And it was about 6 weeks later that I got the letter that I mentioned earlier that said, we would really prefer that you don't come to this group anymore, because you are over the age limit.
You were no longer invited. You had asked a question that they were uncomfortable with answering, And again,
seems that way.
I know your feeling is, hey, I'm not here to convince you, and I'm not asking you to convince me, but again, what you're telling me, I've either experienced directly or I've grappled with in my own mind, these things. And I get it. Like I said, when I say I get it, I honestly mean I get it. I can tell you similar stories growing up and asking questions, disagreeing with my pastor, disagreeing with a youth pastor, disagreeing. And again, it kind of comes back to what we were saying earlier, where, to me, I see what oftentimes is done is we blame God, or we stop seeking God, or we stop looking for answers in God because of the people in front of us, whether that's terrorists or a pastor or whomever. And I'll tell you, I remember being really upset. I was probably in my early 20s, and I was leaving the church. I'd had enough of the church that I grew up in, and it was very materialistic. It was very faith, name it, claim it type of 80s. It was like, following the suit of the televangelists, and everything was about giving to get and claiming things in the name of Jesus. And, your words speak things into existence and all this stuff. And I was learning more and more about the Bible. And I was, early education in a Bible college. And I was growing, I was learning, I was expanding, and everything that I was learning and growing and digging deeper in was leading me away from what that church was promoting. And I said to someone one time, I had told them this, and I had said, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep coming here and having these, listening to these sermons, listening to these people and their thoughts and just disagreeing constantly. It's causing problems. It's causing whatever. And they said, well, your problem is you're looking at man. You need to look at Jesus. And my response was, well, sometimes it's very hard to see Jesus when all these people are standing in front of him. And I didn't say people, I think I said assholes. But either way, that was my perspective. And that's why I'm saying, I get it in all this. However, it didn't lead me away from God. I didn't leave God over it. I saw that man is got problems. We're corrupt. We have issues. And that's all I'm trying to have the discussion with you from is, again, not to convince you per se, but you made a movie, you put your thoughts out there, you put your heart out there, and I commend you for that. That takes a lot, not just skill, but guts to do. But at the same time, we need to be prepared to continue to examine both you and I and be open to that. What if you're wrong? What if you said you're a wisdom seeker? What if you've stopped seeking because you feel like you found, what we call confirmation bias, when we gravitate towards the things we agree with. And that's to both of us. That's not just to you, that's to anyone. But that's my position on these things is, I get it. I understand it. You seem like a good guy from the movie, from talking to you here. You don't seem like you're a arrogant chip on your shoulder trying to, do this cause or trying to, create this movement where you want to take down religion or anything like that.
Exactly.
You're not an evangelism for atheism,
No.
And I get that. And I want to be respectful to that. But I guess, my main point is just, I think you've experienced a lot of, again, what I've gone through in my life with people, and unfortunately they're the ones that speak into our life and teach us the faith. And so when we see them go wrong or the actions be wrong and we look into it, there's a lot of blame we can point, and say people do horrible things in the name of religion or God. I would just challenge that and say, but it's not God,
Yeah.
So,
And what you just shared, John, is very similar to many of the comments I got on the film. The film is on it's on a couple places. It's on Top Documentary Films, it's on YouTube, it's on Vimeo, and in all platforms, it allows people to comment. So
yeah.
what you said is very similar to many of the Christians who watch the film and feel like they need to, tell me not to give up on God.
Yeah. And I think that's in a nutshell what I am saying is, yeah, not to give up on your seeking of God. And if we all stay open-minded with that on both sides, I think that's what I'm looking for in people. Like I said, I'm not going to try to drag you into a debate here and get into the heated discussions like I've done in the past with people, because, that's their energy. That's their direction they come with. And I'll match that. If you come at me, I'll come at you type of thing. You're not that, and I get that. And again, if I came across at first as trying to preach you or whatever, on one hand, of course I am to an extent. I mean, that's the whole point of trying to reach out to people. But at the same time, I want to be respectful in that. And, if your attitude is, hey, take a step back, hold on. I'm not here to debate with you about why people did bad things. I'm here to tell you my story, and this is where it is. I'll respect that, and I'll go that direction with you. Go
Well,
ahead.
I spent an hour and a half prior to this interview watching you have similar conversation that you're having with me with David Smalley.
Yeah.
On your film.
Yeah.
And he would say one thing and you would have a response, and then he would have a response, and it was, an hour and 45 minutes of, basically two talking heads debating each other.
Yeah.
So I get every argument that you and other Christians have made, and that's fine. I just don't have a lot of patience to listen to it.
Yeah, but I think we need to keep questioning the validity of all of our beliefs on both sides of the spectrum.
Well, yeah, that's why I'm here. I would listen. I would have been surprised if you didn't, say what you just said about the film, and I appreciate you being respectful. And I think there's so many people on both sides of the argument that just try to present their case with such a lack of respect for the other person, and I think it just makes them look bad, when they do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know, you don't do that when you share your thoughts, and I did not intend to do that with my film at all. I'm not. In fact, I didn't say anything. I just basically, when I talked about my beliefs, it was just it wasn't even my beliefs. It was my, this is what happened to me, and this is what I was thinking and how I felt. But it wasn't like me proselytizing about leaving God.
Yeah.
It was just saying why I changed my mind. What series of events happened that got me to change my perspective that was just included in this kind of bigger theme that talked about this is happening around the country with tens of thousands of people, including clergy members, which I thought was really, kind of not really discussed a lot, which is why I started with that. But, I just concluded with, the hardest part of making this, John, as you might understand, is how to end it.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't want to say, okay, so now everyone, this is what you should think. That's the last thing I wanted to do. And I just related it to The Wizard of Oz. Mm. And I thought that the idea of believing in God, to me, seemed to be very similar to what Dorothy went through when she met the Wizard of Oz, and was to try to, follow what he directed her to do. And just realize that in the movie, he was a fraud. That she put so much, basically her life on the line, fighting this wicked witch and flying monkeys and, doing all the stuff to get these darn ruby slippers off the feet of, a witch, to just try to get home, and I think there's an interesting parallel because I don't know who, one of these days I got to really research the person who wrote that, because there's so many analogies, the idea of trying to get home to trying to get to heaven.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? At least from my perspective, I thought there was a very interesting parallel to that theme, that she had to go through all these struggles to just do things exactly the right way. And if she did them the right way, this Wizard of Oz, this all-powerful being, would then allow her to have the prize of home. Mm-hmm. And with Christian, the way I see it, or the way I was taught to believe, there's this all-powerful God that if you live your life according to certain guidelines and rules, you will get to heaven. So that's how I use the Wizard of Oz as a way to conclude it and say, well, maybe we don't have to believe in a all-powerful wizard or God. Maybe it comes from what we have inside. Like with Dorothy, the message in the Wizard of Oz was there was nothing external. She didn't have to jump through these ropes. She didn't have to do all these things or follow all these rules or do all this stuff that this fraudulent, wise and powerful Oz was telling her to do. That she just had to kind of trust herself. She had the power. The words of the good witch were, "Don't you realize it? You always had the power, Dorothy. You always had the power within yourself."
That sounds like one of the most evil statements I could think of, though. Just to be honest, I mean, that's because you believe what you do. Yeah,
and
no, absolutely.
To me, that was like a very freeing refreshing thought, kind of
Yeah. No, and I get that. I
paralleled in
mean,
some ways what I felt my journey was.
yeah,
So anyway, that's but I wasn't saying to the viewer, this is what you should think.
right.
This is just what I kind of a perspective that I kind of thought that kind of I thought it was a nice way to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
To tie it all together.
Yeah, and I won't get into the theology part to that point.
No.
I understand what you're saying and how that affects it. What's interesting to me is I ran into that same issue with my week in atheism and trying to figure out, how do I end this? How do I wrap it up? And there were many hurdles throughout that. There was always, it seemed like every segment there was, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to deal with that? And what I struggled with throughout making the movie, filming, I should say, throughout editing it, through everything, was I never wanted it to be a John versus atheism and John wins type of movie. Therefore Christianity wins. That wasn't my intention. My intention was honestly to do what I'm doing with you, listen, learn, hear from atheists about atheism and go through that whole process. Now, of course, in the midst of it, I'm going to say my piece and say what I think. And that's how I learn. That's how everyone learns, and we grow and we challenge beliefs and whatever. So there is that element to it. But I really was, in more of the interviews that I did with David and I, were kind of the constants throughout. But like when I went to the different conventions and I interviewed, I really listened more than I talked, and that was the purpose of it. I wanted to get it from them. It was part of my studying of religion, which atheism falls into a belief system, or whatever you think of it. That's the way I was approaching it. Anyway.
Well, listen, as David Smalley and some of the other atheists at that convention said to you, they really complimented you on having the balls to, subject yourself to a convention there, of atheists. So,
because I was that guy in church saying, is it true? Is this true? And I was always told, oh, John just likes to be argumentative. Why? Because I'm questioning something? Because you're telling me if I claim something into existence, it will exist? And that sounds foolishness to me. That sounds like we're trying to be God, whatever. But if I have one regret over my week in atheism, it's the way I handled the ending. And there's the movie was I was done editing, and originally, it's David and I think it's at Skepticon at the end of the conference. We're kind of standing out in the hallway, the lobby area, and we're talking about how the conference went and how things went. And it kind of wraps up kind of to tone of what David and our personalities were and how we got along, and it kind of ended. And I thought, that's not a bad ending. It kind of just, things went well, whatever. This was a lot of fun, whatever it was, and it kind of would end. And I thought, maybe that's the ending. I don't know. I don't want to force it. I don't want to make it. What am I trying to do with this? And one of the producers and a couple people that I was talking to, were like, it really needs, like, you need to tell them where you stand today. You got to kind of close it. It's you need that altar call, right? You can never have a sermon without an altar call type of thing. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. But
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Well, just meaning you need a call to action. Any good sales pitch needs a good call to action at the end. You don't just
so your movie was a sales pitch.
No, but that's the way the ending was treated. And that's what I'm saying. If I have one regret, that's probably it, because the movie wasn't a sales pitch. But then at the end, I went back and I recorded this monologue of me saying, you see how it ends. And even just artistically, it's different than the rest of the movie. It didn't fit. It didn't fit thematically. It didn't fit style wise. It was just like at the end, it almost came across like I had an edge now. I was a little like, here, now I showed you, basically the ending is I had my week in atheism. It turned into a year. And at the end of it, I'm still a Christian, and what about you? Right. That's kind of the call to action, like I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just,
I'm glad listen, kudos to you for realizing that, because from a creative direction standpoint, I would say that it was a beautiful film, saying that you both had what made your film work so well was that here are two people who admittedly were diametrically opposed philosophically, but yet could still see enough value in each other to have a friendship, consider yourself friends. And it wasn't really meant to be he's right and I'm wrong. It's just saying this is my opinion, this is his. And you did a great job of that throughout the film. And then you just said, concluding it by saying what you said, which was very basically, you gave your final pitch for what you think.
Yeah.
And it would have been much better just ending on a freeze frame of you two hugging.
Yeah. And again, that was kind of the original ending. But then I went back, recorded that, and I had to give it that closing. Again, that altar call, that
because of pitch. A producer who told you had to end with a sales pitch or a call to action.
I won't fully blame it on that person, because I'll take responsibility of it myself. But if that wasn't brought to my attention, it probably wouldn't have gone that way. I'll say it that way. But I made the decision myself. I take responsibility for my action. But again, I kind of had it done at that closing of the Skepticon scene. But, adding that in, I did show it to David afterwards. I said, hey, I want your thoughts. I did this, this is where I'm thinking of putting at the end. And I expected him to be like, no, what are you doing? You're changing the tone of it. You're now all of a sudden you're trying to get the last word, like atheism didn't beat me type of thing. And he didn't, to his credit, he was like, hey, I think it's great. You're saying what you want to say and it's your movie and you can do it. So do it.
That is an exceptional friend.
Yeah. Now, David,
because at that, let me ask you this question. When you asked him that question, was this after you had done it and it was already in the can?
We had both, he was part of the editing process. I'd edit things, send it to him. So he'd already seen it a couple times through, and, we were at the end of it. We had done sound mixing, everything was we were finishing off post-production at that point, finalizing the audio and stuff. And it was pretty much wrapped, and he had seen it all.
But if he said if he responded to that question the way you just responded to me, saying you wish you had changed it, if he had said that to you, would you have had the ability to do that?
No.
If he convinced you.
No,
So
one thing we agreed to going into it was we both had to agree on, these things, the where the scenes cut, editing, change it. Like he had right. I was doing the editing, but he had right to say, I don't agree with that. And if we weren't unanimous about something, we weren't going to do it. So if he said to me,
to be clear, if you would have been able to, if he challenged or questioned the ending,
I would not have put it in.
Oh, you would not have put it in.
I would not.
And it wasn't already done. So if he challenged it and you discussed it and agreed with his perspective, you would have been able to change it before it was already out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He got, agreement with all final cuts. It was done unanimously between us throughout the film. So at the end, when I showed it to him, if he said to me, I really like, if he even said it, softer, like, I really don't like that, I think it changes things, I would have said, okay, then I'm not doing it.
Well, it's not bad the way you did it, but again, I'm a creative director and I'm looking at it as a piece of a creative piece of art. I think your instincts now, and it's easier, when you have the perspective to say that. And I think your instincts now are right. I think that it weakens the film by you having this last 5 minutes, what you believe as a Christian.
Yeah. My altar call. Like I said, it's that, okay, now respond. Like,
yeah,
and that wasn't the intent,
No, I totally understand. And listen, um, you know, if I was more hardcore, if I was a hardcore atheist, that's how I might have ended my film. But I'm not. You know,
Yeah.
I'm not, and I think it's a better film because it just it ends with a question. The film ends with a pan up to the sky and the clouds and a question.
Yeah. And
You
that's,
know, what
yeah.
if we all have, this, and that's all I want. Again, I'm just, I'm thrilled. Again, I'm just thrilled that 40,000 people from around the world have
Yeah,
seen
that's
this.
great.
And it's gotten 7.5 or 7.4 stars on top documentaries. And that, most people in the world believe in God. And there's some people are going to see a film just called Leaving God, and they're not even going to watch it and give it like 1 star just because they hate the title
Yeah. Yeah,
and bring
really.
it down. And I'm sure there's a number of people that did that just to try to trash it.
Yeah.
And despite that, it's got, 7.3 or 7.4 stars from 40,000 people, So it's just, again, it's something, as much as I'm proud of these advertising awards that I've won over the years, I'm really proud that the movie came out as well as it did.
Yeah. No, that's good. Um, I appreciate this conversation, John. It didn't go the way I thought it was going to go and where we're going, but again, I like, even though I saw the movie, I like listening to your story, hearing you gave it a little different color, maybe more detail in some of the parts here. But I appreciate the time with this. And again, if I put you in an uncomfortable situation, I don't mean to do that. I'm not trying to,
No.
just grab you and tell you Jesus loves you, but that is ultimately what I do. So, I mean, that's
No.
what Christianity is about. But
I
but I
just
don't want to.
I know you're a debater and I am not when it
Yeah.
comes to this stuff. So I know that your default is going to be, I guess, I mean, again, I'm just judging from the little I know you, but I just watched, you debate for an hour and 45 minutes.
Sure.
And it seems like you enjoy debating. So I would have been surprised if you didn't try to like counteract some of the things I said or debate some of the things. Again, I'm not arguing. I'm not making an argument. This film isn't an argument. It's just, this is what is happening in this country, including me.
Yeah.
So there's really nothing to debate. It's a documentary documenting what is happening, with all, with sources that I'm referencing, and then documenting my crazy experiences with the church, including doing this ad campaign and getting this, told not to come to bagels and Bibles, and and just thinking about some of this stuff.
So if people want to check out the movie and even reach out to you, directly, if you have anything you want to share, email or any information.
knowing that you have a Christian audience, I'm afraid to give them any information that would give them how to contact me. Because
let me say this. I think I have more atheist listeners than I do Christian listeners, because I get a lot of the emails I rarely get from the Christian side, but I get them from the atheist side more often. So I don't know what the demographic is, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's at least 50-50.
I wouldn't say that necessarily means you have more atheists listeners. It just means you ruffle their feathers more.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to speak up more than
so I would suspect that you get plenty of Christian listeners. But regardless, to answer your first question, the film is entitled Leaving God. I think if you type in the words Leaving God documentary film, it'll come up. It's also on this, like I said, it's on 3 platforms. You could go to topdocumentaryfilms.com. That's a lot to, type. But if you just type in the words Leaving God film or Leaving God documentary film, it should come up.
All right. Well, thanks, John. Again, I appreciate it. It's been good having you on. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me as a guest. I really enjoyed it.
All right. So again, the film is Leaving God, and you can catch it on a couple different platforms. I think I originally watched it on YouTube. I've watched it twice on 2 different things, but check it out and let us know what you think.
Like what you hear? Hate what you hear? Have some thoughts you'd like to get off your chest? We want to hear from you. Contact us at johnchristie.com and be a guest.